It's time once again to talk about budget decks that you can build for each color, where we got some that are competitive and some that are fun. Starting with the color red, I have Ancient Greymon to talk about. It has an explosive and aggressive playstyle that can do a ton of checks instantly with a massive DP Digimon on the board. The source of damage mainly comes from Ancient Greymon, which is the boss Digimon of the deck what you're trying to get into as soon as possible. The one from BT4 can rack up additional security damage based on how many sources it has. Whereas the BT17 does less damage but has removal to delete your opponent's Digimon and can float back your Tamers when it's deleted. Atomic Inferno is another method to apply sudden burst damage combos against your opponents where they don't see it coming. Gravity Curse grants you access to instant memory out of nowhere to make even more plays, and usually you're trying to go for the lethal swing with it. And that means you don't even have to worry about paying the memory back at the end of turn. The overall idea is to try to play as many Tamers as possible, with Takuya being the main focus of the deck, so then you can digivolve him into a Gunimon or Burning Greymon to make separate attacks. A Gunimon can help you warp straight into an Ancient Greymon instead of traditionally digivolving through your level 3, 4, 5, and 6. The lower end support consists of rookies that help you search and find the pieces that you need to ensure you can execute these combos consistently. The total cost to build this deck is roughly $87, which is slightly high to start off with, but keep in mind it is competitively viable in the current meta. We'll also be getting a little bit of additional support in the BT18 set, which is also known as Special Release 2.0 for us in English. So if you want to see more deck discussion videos like these, make sure to subscribe and turn on that notification bell right now to stay tuned for more, and also give this video a like to show your support. Next up, we got the blue variant of Ancient Greymon, which is Ancient Garurumon. It has a similar concept to Ancient Grey because you're trying to establish Tamers onto the board, which is going to be Koji, and so that you can digivolve into Lobomon and Kendall Garurumon with them. Lobomon can warp right into Ancient Garurumon for reduced cost, and once this card is out, it can bounce one of your opponent's Digimon with the lowest level back to their hand, and whenever your opponent adds a card to their hand during your own turn, you make them add a security to their hand as well. Forcing your opponents to add their security back to their hand is insanely good, and the reason is because it plays around any security effects that can potentially come out and give your opponents value, such as Tamers, option cards, or even bombs. The deck also has an aggressive playstyle, intending to finish games as soon as possible with speedy attacks, especially thanks to the Ukumon. As you push out, you get to hatch on raising and continue to repeat again and again. Although it doesn't have the explosiveness to deal a bunch of damage in one go, but it has a lot of tools for control to ensure a steady game-winning pace. Part of this comes from the consistency of the draw power, as you can cycle through many cards, ensuring that you can always optimally build into your combo pieces. Despite not having high DP power, this is where the BT17 Koji comes in providing jamming to ensure that you won't be deleted by security battles. And for the older BT7 Koji, you can play around blockers as well. The deck costs around $86 to build, and I promise you guys, this is going to be the last one with this high of a price point, as the rest of the decks I'm going to be talking about in this video are going to be significantly lower. But aside from playing with its original blue base, you can actually play it with a red base as well. We have seen this deck top a decent amount of large events, and just like Ancient Greymon, we can expect to be getting additional support in BT18/2.0 special release for us in English. Next up for yellow, I got Shine Greymon to talk about. It's interesting to see because this deck used to be optimally ran with a red base instead, but ever since BT17 came out, all the new support cards are pure yellow, meaning we're switching back to directions to its original roots where it first came out in BT2. The strategy is to establish your Agumon and your Greymons on the board alongside having Marcus, which helps you fight together. Geo Greymon, Rise Greymon, and Shine Greymon all have effects that can help you play your Marcuses from your hand for free. And the BT12 Marcus is the most important one that you want to see as soon as possible, because whenever he attacks, it lets you digivolve up into your line for free too. Comboing it with the BT12 Shine Greymon, you can chunk down your opponent's security very quickly as the main offensive strategy. There are other Shine Greymons that you can play as your main or even secondary based on your own personal playstyle and preference. The archetype's main way of removal is DP reduction, which comes in increments, whether it's 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 DP at a time. You can spread it across multiple Digimon or stack it all up in one big stack Digimon to deal with your opponent's big bosses. And one exciting thing is that in BT21, we can expect to be receiving even more support for this deck, meaning this is the perfect time to pick it up because the cost to build this deck is only $67. So some of you guys have requested me to cover Argamon in the comments. And with that, I think it's a pretty good idea to have that included as our green budget deck choice. As a quick introduction, Argamon shares the exact same name across all its different levels, from 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The main strategy of the deck is Tamer Lockdown, meaning you're suspending your opponent's Tamers and preventing them from unsuspending. The game plan is to slow down your opponent's plays to prevent them to gain any value off their tamers, and heavily punishes them that actually rely as their core strategy. It's pretty funny because if you look back to all the decks we covered so far before this one are all tamer heavy, and I would imagine this would be a hard counter to them. It can climb up the Digivolution stack very quickly thanks to Digisorption, which reduces your Digivolution costs. Aside from suspending your opponent's tamers, you want to suspend your own as well, and this is where Rhythm comes in, being the main tamer of your deck, and whenever she's suspended, you can gain additional value. By going into the BT17 Argamon and absorbing all the other Argamons back from trash by placing it underneath its sources, you can delete your opponent's Digimon, and the more you have under it, the higher level you can delete. To top it all off with the synergy, Quartzmon is a perfect level 7 fit because it can just suspend absolutely everything and nothing but itself can unsuspend, so then you can slowly beat down your opponent while trashing their security and gaining memory back when you Digivolve into it. One of the major weaknesses of this archetype is that it lacks protection, meaning your opponent can easily use Digimon effects or option cards to remove your Argomon. And this is where Rapidmon comes in handy because it helps mitigate it by a little bit. The total cost to build this deck is around $66, and most of the higher end price cards really just comes from the Ukomon and Quartzmon. As we move on to the black budget deck, we got one of my personal favorites, dorugormon. This deck can take on two forms of different bases, purple with Lugomon or black with dorugormon. And if you see my deck guide video recently, you know I've been having a ton of fun playing the black version of the deck. In that particular build, alongside with most player preferences, you can see that build runs X-Antibody Protoform and Shine Greymon Ruin mode, which are very pricey cards that won't work for the budget. The good news is you don't necessarily need to run these cards because the deck core functions very well just by itself. By taking those pricier cards out, you can find the total budget of this deck going all the way down to $78, and that's actually not bad of a deal. The archetype utilizes tamers in the form of Mind Link by tucking it underneath the stack and providing additional inheritables such as Blocker, Piercing, Alliance, and Jamming with Kosuke, AG, and Marvin Jackson. The combination of sliding your Kosuke underneath your Dorumon to give it protection aside from deletion is a very good counter against blue decks. It uses Collision to turn all your opponent's Digimon into Blocker to force any redirect attacks, alongside with Taunting so that your Greymon can Digivolve into any level 6. There's a ton of control in the form of removal, protection, defense, blocking, but the deck also has a lot of tools to go for all-out explosive attacks. Piloting this deck can be slightly complicated and overwhelming at the start, which is why it's really important to put the time to practice as much as possible with it. If you want to see the full power version of this deck and learn everything you need to know on how to play it and build it, make sure to check the deck profile video out as well, as I'll leave the link in the description box down below. One of the most exciting things is that BT20 is coming up with Alphamon support, meaning there's potential that some of those cards will be applicable for this deck for further upgrades. For purple, I got Heavy Metal Dramon for you guys as it first debuted in EX7 with a whole new Digivolution line for Impmon that goes all the way into this evil Dark Dragon. The main goal is to have as little cards as possible in your hand. Optimally, the number would be 4 or less. You want to utilize the trash as your entire resource so that you can Digivolve into your Digimon directly from there, thanks to Yamon and Yuki being the main tamer. This is one of the many playstyles where you don't have to worry if your stack ever gets deleted because you can always access it back very easily thanks to those cards. It also mixes in the red elements to provide DP buffs to make your stack as big as possible and deletion effects for removal. By Digivolving your way up to Heavy Metal Dramon, you're going to find yourself trashing cards from your hand which are intended to be set up so that they can be played back with Heavy Metal Dramon's end of turn effect. And just like I mentioned before, with fewer cards in your hand, the stronger Digimon you can bring back. Afterwards, you want to beat down your opponent's security by having Loudmon underneath it, which provides security +1 across the entire archetype as long as it's evil or Dark Dragon trait. One of the downsides of this deck is that it's slightly incomplete with not having many support cards within the card pool at the moment. And this is where most players will have to fill in with other purple cards for the time being. One thing to note though, Impmon and Yuki are the main characters of the Digimon Liberator debug novel series, meaning we can expect to get even more support in the future. And that is why you want to pick up the cards to build this deck as soon as possible, because the total cost is only $46, which is probably going to be one of the cheapest decks that we're going to be covering in today's video. Now, originally I was going to cover Eosmon as the white choice of the budget deck, but there's one problem: the promo Morphomon. Just in case you don't know, it is incredibly expensive just for one copy at the moment, and there's just absolutely no way I can fit it in the budget range. That card is super crucial to the core strategy, and it's really not the easiest card to get either, which is probably why it has such a high price point at the moment. But for those who are interested in how much it will cost, you're gonna need at least $110 to build this particular version. which honestly isn't that bad, especially if you're a huge fan of the Digimon. But if it wasn't for the promo Morphomon, I feel like this deck can easily cost around $60. So to make up for that, I got a couple of other extra budget decks to recommend you guys. And the next one is going to be an NSP, which is also known as Nature Spirits. The deck plays multiple colors, including blue, black, yellow, and green. And that might seem strange at first, because how are you supposed to Digivolve up this deck? Well, that's where the alternative Digivolution requirement comes in, because all of them can go on top of each other as long as they have the NSP trait. The playstyle is very easy to understand and beginner friendly, because the main goal is just to Digivolve up and utilize your when Digivolving effects. Once you go into a level of 5, you can keep it on the board and counter against your opponent's attacks with Saber Leomon Ace. Otherwise, go into Aldradimon to cycle the top of your deck and ideally play out Saber Leomon Ace that way instead, so then you can utilize the last effect of Aldradimon to end of turn DNA going into your main level 7 boss of the deck, Talakmon. Talakmon can summon out NSP bodies from your hand and DP reduce your opponent's Digimon on their side, and the wider you have, the greater you can punish them. The game plan is to repeat this as much as possible, go wide, and make attacks one at a time to help you win. The total cost to build it is around $61, with the highest price card being Davis from BT3, which is a really good searcher. Another deck that got tons of cards from EX7 is Dragon Lynx. This archetype first debuted in the EX3 set with both colors red and black having Metallic Dramon and Volcanic Dramon. All cards within the line can digivolve between each color, and all of them also have on-play effects. But you can turn those on-play effects into pseudo-when digivolving effects thanks to Hina. This card is a necessary tamer piece for the deck in order for it to function optimally. The lower end focuses on draw and searching for pieces to ensure that you can establish Hina as soon as possible on the board. By going into your level 6's Volcanic Dramon or Metallic Dramon, they can stop your opponents for one whole turn from making certain plays, such as digivolving or moving Digimon from the breeding area to the battle area. The deck also has a lot of removal and control to deal with your opponent's Digimon in the form of de-digivolving and DP-based deletion. By slowing down your opponent's plays and win condition, you want to start beating your opponent's security down with your massive dragons. The budget of this deck is about $51, with all the core pieces being very affordable, with the only exception of Ukomon being the highest priced card currently, which is intended to help you speed up your consistency. But hopefully we get some additional support in the future where we no longer require it. Let me know in the comments if you have been working on any other budget decks. Make sure to check out the deck profile videos right here to learn more about every deck that I cover in today's video. As always, thank you so much for watching. You guys have a great day, great night, wherever you are. See you next video, and this is AVAULT signing out.